Hey, Judge here. I'm going to show you pretty quickly here how to make a loop in one of your lines. Um, there's two different ways to make a loop in your line. One is just a open bury, and that is where you would take a fid, open up this line, bury this line into your working end of your rope, and then that would be considered an open bury. And that's pretty strong. There's no knots or anything that holds that together. Basically, what you're relying on is the friction of the rope, and um, when it pulls tight, it grips itself and it doesn't allow it to slide. Um, they recommend that if you do an open bury like that, the tailing end, which is this end, the tailing end has to be pretty long. So it should be 35 to 75 times the diameter of your rope. So if that's a 1/4 inch, then you times that by 35 to 75 times, and that tells you the length that needs to be buried into itself. And the range is a little different because a lot of the ropes have different gripping characteristics. So that it all depends on friction. So some ropes are slicker than others. So that's called an open bury. What I want to show you today is a much better method. It's called a locking Brummel splice, and the line amount that you have to bury is way shorter because it's not relying on friction. So if I wanted to make a loop, say about that big, I probably would only bury about maybe that much of it. It's not relying on friction. So I try to go maybe a fid length. This is just a real cheap plastic fid that you can buy. I bought it in a kit. It has multiple different sizes. You can do like 8mm necklines or 10mm tug lines. So the bury's about that long. First, what you want to do is you want to get your end set up to bury. So I cut this with a knife. It's pretty frayed. You can just take a lighter and melt this together and kind of pinch it down, and I'll show you how to do that. A couple other methods if you want to go a little fancier and make it a little bit nicer is you could take a little tiny screwdriver or a little pick and flick out a couple of these strands of rope and then cut them with a pair of scissors at different lengths up here. This is about a 12-strand rope, so if you were to cut about 4 or 5 of those lengths of ropes out of there, then what that's going to do is leave this end just a little bit longer, and then it will taper that rope. So that's one method. You can also just take a pair of scissors and cut that at an angle and then burn it, kind of mash it together, and that'll create a little taper. Or you could just make it blunt. And so just take a lighter, kind of get it going. Don't get it too hot or it'll melt to your fingers. This is a poly rope, so it melts pretty easy. And you're just looking to kind of get it together a little bit. It doesn't have to be solid. One thing I do notice that if I make too big of a ball right here, I can actually feel it inside my line. So I just try to collect it just so that it doesn't go loose when I'm trying to slide it in and out of the lines. So I did that end. That's a pretty blunt one, pretty nice. So what you want to do is figure out the length that you want your loop. You can make your loops real small. You can make them bigger. I like loops about that big right there. And so there's a couple different methods that you can figure out your loop. You could take a piece of masking tape and put it around the ends there. You could take a Sharpie. A lot of times I just do a Sharpie. After doing so many of these loops, you just do them. You don't really have to mark them. but kind of marking them for your first couple kind of makes it just a little easier. So I'm going to do a loop about that size right there, and then I'm going to bury that much of it. So I'm just going to make a line right across there. That'll just help me kind of re-put it back together really quickly. All right, so that's the setup right there. Take your fid, put it the tailing end of your line in your fid, and then I'm going to find that black mark that I had, and then I want to get this fid directly right in the middle of that line. And you could take a smaller fid and kind of pick at it a little bit. And one thing that you want to focus on is making sure that you get through there clean and that you're not grabbing any fibers or any little bits. It's got to be very clean. And so sometimes I'll kind of put that through there, I'll open it up, I'll take a look at it and see that hole right there. That's pretty clean. I don't have any other fibers. That strand on the left is on the left, that strand is on the right. And if you take your time, you can make them super nice. So I've made a little indentation right there. I can slide the bigger fid through. And then there's my 2 black dots again. All right, so that's pretty easy. Then what you want to do is you want to take the other end, your working end, and you want to slide that through your tailing end. So I'm going to take this fid off. I'm going to put it on my working end. Just like that. And then you want to go through not at the very next cross area there. You want to skip 1 or 2, because when this rope folds over and it starts going back that other direction, you got to leave just a little bit of space, like about that much, so that the ropes lay flat against each other before it actually starts going back through this other side. So line up my little knot right there, my black marks. I'm going to take my skinnier fid, and I kind of know where those black marks are now, and that's where my thumbnail is about where I want to poke my fid through. So I can actually just move that and then just start working that. And it's just rope. So once you start doing some of these loops, you can put a very large object through the middle of this rope. You can actually stretch this rope out pretty big, and I could fit that snap through that rope. If I make a loop on this and I'm making another loop or something and I happen to need to slide this through, you can really stretch out that rope. The less that you stretch it out, the better, of course. So I want to make sure that I don't have any loose fibers that are not going the right direction. So that's pretty good. Then what I want to do, take my large fid with my working end and put through there, making sure that it's right in the middle, there's no fibers. All right. So I took my fid off. So basically what you're doing is you're making an and sign. See that? Slide your 2 black marks back together. there's my 2 black marks. Pull your working end through. And look at that. So that's called a locking Brummel splice, and I'll show you why. So this is your tailing end. We're going to bury that. This is your working end up here. And as this loop gets force pulled on it, it locks that down. And once this is buried into that line, there's no way that that could ever pull through, because it has to pull an entire rope through itself. So that's called the locking Brummel splice. Pretty easy to do. Once you get going on these, you can bang one out in about 2 minutes, and you can make them look really good. I got a funny story. Me and Larry were camping up at Snow Park near Fish Lake, and we got done with our runs. We were back at camp. It was probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna go take a nap, it's been a long day. I was like, all right, I'm gonna stay out here and I'm gonna make an entire 6-dog gang line, and neckline, everything full setup. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah, I bought some line, I got some fids, and I'm gonna make me a 6-dog setup. And he was like, wow, okay. And I told him I'd race him. I said, you go nap, I'm gonna start on my 6-dog line, and we'll see who gets done first. And so he went in his trailer, and I started going to town on doing my 6-dog line. And it was probably 30 degrees out. It was a pretty good day, but it was definitely cold. My fingers got a little numb towards the end. So I did a full 6-dog setup, and I thought I seen him peeking out his window of his trailer every now and then. But got that thing done, and he comes out of his trailer, and sure enough, sitting there on the ground was a complete setup for a 6-dog line. And it probably took me about 2.5 hours, but that was non-stop working on it. So once you get good at these, you can do them fairly quickly. So now we're gonna bury this end of this line. That's the perfect length that I like, just about 1 fid length. So what we want to do is we want to get our fid into the working end of our line. And there again, we also want to leave a little bit of space so when those 2 lines go against each other, they lay flat. If you go too sharp, you'll have a big bend right there. You want to relax that bend just a little bit. So we're going to leave just a little bit of space. So I'm going to probably poke through right about here. And you're trying to get to the inside of the hollow braid now. We're not going through. So, see, I'm not quite center there. It kind of jabbed off to the side. So I'm going to push that strand over. I'm going to push that strand over and try to get to the center. Definitely have to have a little bit of patience. Some line is a little easier to work with than others. Alright, so that looks pretty good right there. I got one little fiber there that needs to go the other direction, so I'm going to just work it over. Alright, so we're in. So I'm going to take my larger fid. Actually, an easier way to do this is put your larger fid in there. You're going to have to start working that line, and you're going to see the friction that I'm talking about. So when you get line stretched, it develops a lot of friction. and you just got to keep working it. And if the more you bunch it up, the harder it's going to be. So if you can keep kind of working it. See, I'm not getting in there very good. Seeing if my tailing in will fit in this smaller fid, which it does. So I'm going to use my smaller fid. That'll be a lot easier. See how easy that is? So I went about 1 fid length, and so I'm going to try to poke my fid out somewhere about right here. And if you go too short, it's all right. You just have to redo it. So this one isn't as critical to get it right in the center because you're just popping this rope out for a second. So that's pretty good right there. So now I have my fid through on both ends. Now what I want to do is I just want to take my tailing end, bend it over, put it in this smaller fid. Again, patience. So I got it wedged in there. So now all I need to do is basically keep pushing and get that tailing end through the working end. So my fid's about ready to pop out the other side. Alright, so now I got my tailing end through. So now make sure your Brummel splice is locked. Now you can let go of your tailing end, let it just suck into the line, just like that. Now you kind of want to work this back, make sure it's nice and tight, and then I just kind of start wiggling, and you want to stretch that outer working end over the top of your buried tailing end. And there you go. So now we got our loop, locking Brummel splice, and that one's a pretty nice one. See how leaving that little space there allows that rope to kind of lay flat? And no matter how hard you pull on this loop, that tailing end will never be able to slide through that lock. So it makes it very strong. And you can see right here where our buried end stops. See how that's kind of abrupt? So if you taper that to where it's a little bit more smooth, you really never even notice how that stops right there. But I mean, you really can't even see that too much. All right, locking Brummel splice. Now you know, pretty easy.